business, life, and relationships. This is the Growth to Freedom Show. Now, here is your host, Dan Kuschell.
Welcome to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you transform your life, business, and relationships. And I've got a challenge for you today, and that is the whole idea of disrupting the status quo. Are you ready to disrupt the status quo? I mean, there's nothing worse than mediocrity, right? And mediocrity sucks. And the fact is, I've been there too long. I know so many people that have been there too long, and today is the day that changes. Do you know the definition of mediocrity? One of the definitions in the dictionary is mediocrity is defined as the highest degree of poor. You know what that means? That means we're really good at sucking really bad. And you know what? That's no way to go through life. And today's show is about showing you how to disrupt your status quo and also rise above the noise, to be able to go out there to attract more confidence, more clarity, more capabilities to get what you deserve. You know what? I'm fired up today. Are you fired up today? I'm fired up today. You know why? I had some incredible conversations. I feel so blessed, so fortunate for my life. I had two incredible conversations over the last week. Well, many conversations, but two of them that stand out. One with John Corcoran. And I'm going to talk about a question with John Corcoran today. By the way, if you want to check out the episode with John Corcoran, you can go to growthtofreedom.com/11, growthtofreedom.com/11. He's a media expert, has written for all types of major publications, and he's become a good friend. We were having a conversation. He asked a question I'm going to talk about that changed my whole perspective. I had another conversation with Shannon Waller, who's one of the key executive team at Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan's company. You can check out an interview I did with Shannon about teamwork and the Team Success Handbook at growthtofreedom.com/19. And she asked a question about how are you utilizing your talents, your gifts, your unique abilities, as they call them in Strategic Coach. So we're going to hit on that. We're going to talk about three, what Dan Sullivan calls game-changing people that are transforming their industry. They're disrupting the status quo in their industry. We're going to talk about Dan Sullivan. We're going to talk about David Berg. We're going to talk about a good friend of mine, Joshua Shafran. And so today's show is action-packed. By the way, let me back up just for a little bit here. If you want to reach us, we'd love to reach out to you. You can connect with us on Twitter at Dan_Kuschell. That's Dan_Kuschell, or email us at info@growthtofreedom.com. That's info@growthtofreedom.com. And by the way, we've got a special resource package for you today with some special bonuses that you're going to want to get your hands on. Why? How'd you like to be better at influence, better at persuasion, better at marketing, telling your story better? And in fact, that's part of what today's all about. So let's dive into it, because we've got a lot to be able to go on. So I was at Strategic Coach last week. You know, I go there quarterly. It's been 3 years. Joe Polish introduced me to Dan Sullivan. And one of the things that they talked about in there is about this idea of changing your game. I mean, are you playing a big game right now, by the way? Could you be playing a bigger game? And what would that look like? So I want to have you stop and think about it. We have a tool at Genius Network where I work with Joe Polish. We're teamed up, and we've been helping him over the last 3 years. And he has this tool. It's called the Where Are You tool. Why don't you get you to think about this? Where are you today? Mentally, physically, socially, spiritually, emotionally, financially, right? Where are you today? And where are you going, right? Do you have that clear path of what that looks like? Have you taken the time to really define what that looks like for you? I mean, where are you today? And where are you going? And number 3, how are you going to get there? Right? How are you going to get there? And a critical question to be asking is, why do you want to get there? Right? See, one of the things I learned years ago is that, if you don't define what you want, you're like a boat without a rudder. And guess what happens? We end up on the freaking rocks, don't we? And that's no fun. I don't want to see you crash. You don't want that either. You know what? I've spent too many days with sleepless nights, too many nights sleepless, distressed, frustrated, confused, questioning, doubting my own personal talents and abilities, right? And we're going to help you shake that out of you to, define where you are now. In order to get you from where you are to where you want to go, guess what? It helps to have a good reference point, doesn't it? Right? And if you're not willing to invest the time in you to ask great questions, why should anyone else, right? So it starts with you. Taking the time to answer those couple simple questions. Where are you today? Where do you want to go? How are you going to get there? And why, right? Tony Robbins, we've talked about it in previous episodes. I've been fortunate and blessed to be mentored and learned from Tony over the years. Tony talks about the idea when your why is big enough, right? When it becomes a must instead of a should, that's when you can conquer just about any obstacle that may come your way. And you know what? Life's going to throw you a curveball. It's certainly going to do that. You're going to face obstacles. You're going to face challenge, especially if you want to be a game changer, especially if you want to play a big game. And I know you do, otherwise you wouldn't be watching. You wouldn't be listening. So today's about helping you play a much, much bigger game. But let me back up just a little bit. When I was speaking to Shannon the other day, she took us through an exercise about our backgrounds, and essentially what it really honed in for me or anchored in was, how'd you get here, right? Why are you here? What brought you to this place? And I started thinking about it, and I don't think I've ever shared the story that I'm going to share with you other than with my wife and my dad, who knew it because he lived through it. I got involved in direct response marketing when I was 16 years old. You know why? Not because I was chasing money, not because I was chasing opportunity. You ever been in a place and time where you felt like you had a gun put to your head and you were boxed in, you were cornered in, and you had nowhere else to go? I mean, that's called survival, isn't it, right? You've been there. I know you've been there. I've been there too. And we have a choice, that choice. And for me, I made a choice. And I'm going to share that story with you here because what happened for me was I ended up in a situation. I was 16 years old. I was a highly touted baseball recruit, and my career was building. Things were going extremely well. And one summer, I decided that I was going to switch from playing for my high school coach to a coach who had been nominated to be in the Hall of Fame in Michigan as one of the most prolific coaches in the history of Michigan baseball. And what happened was my high school coach got irritated. He got pissed. He got frustrated. You know what he told me? As a 16-year-old child, he said, Dan, the whole reason I have this summer team is for you. Call that guilt, right? Call that shaming. Call that embarrassing. He says, you know what? You're on a fast path, but guess what? I'm a gatekeeper. And when colleges contact me about you, I'm not going to sell you to those schools. In fact, I'm not going to promote you to colleges for you to get a scholarship. Now, he also knew my family story. As a kid, I was on welfare. I grew up in the inner city of Detroit. And he knew that my path was predicated on me acquiring a scholarship, right? That was going to be the ticket. And here I was at 16 years old looking at my high school coach telling me that he was going to shut it all down. Now I had a choice. I was backed into a corner. You know what I did? I didn't go into victim mode or being victimized mode. I thought to myself, what could I do to promote myself? And that was my introduction to direct response marketing at 16. I don't remember if I came up with the idea or my dad and I collaborated on the idea, but we decided that we were going to sell me to colleges. And you know what I did? I did the best thing I thought of. I basically put together a direct mail package. It had essentially a high-profile resume in it. This is back in the 1980s, by the way, before social media existed, before video production existed. We put together a resume, we put together a cover letter, and we put together a snapshot of basically highlights of my career in video and also in the resume. We packaged it up and we did priority mailings to these college coaches. And I seemed, because we didn't have a lot of money. We were doing this 5 a week, 6 a week. And I remember targeting like 100 or 200 colleges to be able to promote myself. And you know what happened? The letters started going to the school, and guess what I found out? My high school coach wasn't responding. And guess what happens when that goes on? They think you have an attitude problem. They think that you have an issue. And it left me on the side of the road having to come up with another way. Long and the short of it is, that's how I got involved in direct response. It wasn't to chase money. It was because I had to. I was passionate. I wanted to live my dream and play not only college baseball, but pro baseball. And unfortunately, all that college worked out, but playing pro baseball with injuries just didn't happen. But I challenge you, as you think about that story, where are you today? What adversity are you looking right now at? And you've got a couple choices. And you can choose to play the victim role. You could be victimized by someone else. I could have easily played that role. Or you could stand up and come up with a solution right now to be a game changer. to play a bigger game, rise above the noise, rise above adversity. And you know what? We all have it inside of us. If this 16-year-old kid from the inner city was on welfare and food stamps can come up with a simple idea like that, and you know, I didn't know it would work. I could have failed. I could have wasted the money. But that was my opportunity. And you know what ended up happening? I ended up getting recruited by colleges like Clemson, Arizona State. I got recruited by Central Michigan University. And ultimately, injuries led me to having to go to a smaller school. I ended up proud to say I went to a great school in Michigan called Aquinas College. Had a couple years of just incredible run, and then more injuries. I ended up at Wayne State for my final 2 years. I ended up being a volunteer hitting coach for the college. And so many incredible experiences translated out of this. You know, some people would call it a tragedy or a crisis. And it's all how we view it. What lens are you going to be looking at it through? And so the whole point of that story is, what crisis, what are you facing right now in adversity that you can parlay into something that makes you a game changer, that makes you bigger than the game, right? And play that game that you deserve. And we're going to talk about an exercise that you can look at, because you know what? Wherever you're at, whether you're in your teens, whether you're in your mid-30s, whether you're in your 60s, there's still a song inside of you. There's a book inside of you too. And I want to help you realize that you can get that gift out there. You deserve it. You're a champion. I want to help you be the champion that you deserve to be, to play that big game. And this exercise from Strategic Coach will give you a playbook to be able to do that. We're going to talk about David Berg and how his company here locally in Phoenix, Arizona, is transforming the way healthcare is delivered. You're going to hear about an incredible story. I want to share it with you, how it impacted me. We're going to talk about Dan Sullivan and his 4 C's. We're going to talk about the Prophet with Joshua Shafran, that and a whole lot more coming up in just a few moments. But before we do, I want you to realize it doesn't matter where you've been, it matters where you want to go. And it starts with having the right mindset and getting grounded mentally, physically, socially, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. And it starts now, and it starts today. And we're going to give you the tools to be able to do just that. More on growthtofreedom.com right after this. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com. Boy, howdy, we got a lot of energy today, don't we? Well, let me give you a quick summary of the first segment of the show. It's all about you disrupting the status quo. And you know what? We all have experiences. We all have crises we've dealt with, right? I'm no better than you. I've just had other experiences, and that's what I call it, other experiences. And, you know, I think about where I've been and where I grew up and where I'm at today, and I feel so blessed, so fortunate for what's happened. You know, I wasn't the best student in school. I wasn't necessarily the best athlete. I'm probably your typical overachiever, right, where I've had to maximize all the tools and capabilities God's given me to the fullest. And I think about, you know, over the last decade of my career, I've been fortunate to interview over 500 of the leading experts in the world. Many of them I considered mentors, coaches, heroes in many ways, right? And these have been my coaches, my influences. Many of them have now become great friends. I mean, you know, one of my dear friends is Joe Polish of Genius Network. And, you know, there's the whole 7 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon, right? Well, there's 2 degrees of separation with Joe Polish, which is why the highest level entrepreneurs come together with Joe and Genius Network to be able to connect, collaborate, contribute together to have and experience their next business breakthroughs, right? And it's a really cool environment, and I'm blessed to be a part of that. And so I think back, like, what got me here? And I think a lot of it has to do with this simple tool that was shared with me recently. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's about changing your game, right? And I'm going to walk through how you can change your game. Now, this comes from Strategic Coach. If you want to learn more about Strategic Coach, you can go to strategiccoach.com. Again, you can get a feel for Strategic Coach by listening to the interview I did with Shannon Waller. She's one of the incredible coaches there at Strategic Coach. And you can visit our site at growthtofreedom.com/19 to hear that interview. But this whole process of changing your game, and essentially, if you can picture this, 3 circles, A, B, and C. B and C circles are inside A. You know, so there's the larger circle A, and inside of that is little less larger circle B, and inside of that is C. And if you're watching this right now, you can actually see it on camera. You've got the larger circle A, B, and C. And all of us are playing this game, right? And call the big circle A the game we're playing, whatever game that might be. You might be in media production, you might be in TV production, you might be an audio engineer, you might be, running a cleaning business, you might be a pest control person, you might be working in a big company, right? I know most people that listen to our show are entrepreneurs. You're a business owner, maybe it's a brick and mortar, maybe it's an online, but whatever it is, we all are playing that game. So define your game, number one. What game are you deciding to play? Dan Sullivan has an incredible question called, who do you want to be a hero to? Right? One of the most prolific things any of us can do is decide who do you want to be a hero to, and do it up front, in advance, in full. You know why? It takes just as much work and energy to start at the bottom and work with beginners as it does to start at the top and work with the most highly successful people in the world, doesn't it? The difference is the capabilities that you and I have. However, you can start building and getting a name for yourself by focusing on working with the affluent, working with the highest level people in the world. So number one is define the game. Who do you want to be a hero to? Number two, as you look at your game, there's things you do in your game, A, B, and C. A are those things that really irritate you. Dan Sullivan calls them irritant. What are the irritants you have to deal with doing what you do? Right? I'm going to share mine, by the way. I'm going to just be transparent with you and give you an idea of what it's a day in my life, right? As one example for you to look at. There's irritants you have, and then there's the things that are the B things. Dan calls that being okay. It's status quo. It's just being okay. And then the C things are what he calls the things that fascinate and motivate you, and will for the next 25 years, right? Now, here's the thing. If you spent more time doing the things that fascinate and motivate you and do less of the things that irritate you or are just okay, what would that look like? Well, let's take a look at a relationship. If you have a relationship, a spouse that's irritating or just okay, right? Well, what does that look like? You know what that looks like, right? It ends up being a statistic. And the statistics show 56% of people that get married the first time end up divorced because it was either irritating or it was just okay, right? For each of the parties, right? But on the other hand, what if you're in a situation where it fascinates and motivates you? And you know what? That takes work, doesn't it? But it also takes an awareness about what is it that fascinates and motivates you and putting it into play. Now, in business, for me, for example, one of my irritants is working with staff that don't lead. In other words, there's nothing worse than having a team member that will only do exactly what you tell them to do, right? Because for me, that's just irritating. I want someone who's resourceful, who anticipates needs, right? Who goes above and beyond. They do more than what they're expected. WIT, whatever it takes mentality. On the other end, another irritating thing for me is more of a personal thing where I have very little boundaries. I'm a 24/7 on the clock kind of guy, meaning my clock's always going, my brain's always going unless I set up boundaries. And I'm working on my game to set up boundaries. Why? Because if I don't, you maybe have heard my story. If you haven't, I ended up in a hospital 2 weeks after my son was born in 2007. I was running 5 companies at the same time. I had 200 roughly employees. We built it up to a very substantial business model between a media company, a publishing company, a coaching company, a merchant company, etc., and a consulting company. Those 5 companies working, we were doing some big things. We had over 100,000 clients, ladies and gentlemen. We were coaching over 30,000 people every 6 months. We had massive momentum. And I was sleeping 2 hours a day. Why? Because it's all I knew is how to go fast and how to build and grow and advance. And I had a big vision to transform the industry I was in, and we did so many incredible things. But 2 weeks after my son was born, I wake up with chest pains one morning, end up in a hospital for 4 days, and had to sign a disclaimer that said, I have a 1 in X chance of dying on the table. And that's a wake-up call, isn't it? Long and the short of it is, it helped me get very clear on what I wanted to do. But one of the irritants was boundaries. I'm working real hard on this. What Dan Sullivan calls free days. More free days, more free time, focus time, right? Next, another irritant for me is fragmented communication. I like face-to-face communication much better than texts or emails or voicemails or video type messages. And then another irritant is management, working in a management role versus leadership. My unique ability is building and growing momentum in things and in people. I love investing in people. Most of the people I've been able to work with over the years that I've personally coached or worked with and had a direct influence on, they grew their companies. I've got dozens and dozens of case studies of people advancing 6- and 7-figure type growth in short periods of time. Other irritants for me, administrative duties. The B, the things that are okay, things like reporting, right? Working in an office, right? Having to do certain types of tasks, the things that I love to do. I love to create, I love to coach, I love to lead, I love to inspire, which is, by the way, why we created Growth to Freedom, right? Why we created the show. I love creating presentation. I love creating models in business that, transform the norm and create what Dan Sullivan or Joe Polish calls ELF, easy, lucrative, and fun. I love coaching and leading. I love integrating the pieces of the business model that create exponential type growth, right? And see, as I look at the time I'm spending in each of these, I'm working real hard to get it to a place where I spend most of my time in the C. And what I want you to do when on the break, I want you to take a look at where you're at time-wise and how you can move to spend more time in the C range of doing the things you love that fascinate and motivate you. When we come back, we're going to talk about David Berg. We're going to talk about Joshua Shafran. More right after this on growthtofreedom.com. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com. Are you ready to disrupt the status quo? And guess what? It starts with you, right? It starts with you. And on top of that, where could you disrupt the status quo in your industry? Where you go out and find a big problem, find a big solution. You know what? If you can find a big solution to a big problem in any industry, you can transform it and build wealth. And you know what? Wealth is relative. It's not just about money. It's about the growth you experience, the mastery, the contribution. And that's what I've discovered over the last decade, especially after that hospital incident that I was talking about in the first segment of the show. In fact, let me give you a quick summary of the first two segments of the show. We've been talking about disrupting that status quo, what inspired us to do today's show. We've been talking about Dan Sullivan. We've been talking about Strategic Coach. We've been talking about the Where Are You tool from Genius Network and how you can apply that in your life. And in order to get you from where you are to where you want to go, it helps to have a good starting point, right? About changing your game, identifying, where you're at, what are the irritants, what are just okay, and what fascinates and motivates you as far as your skills, talents, and guess what? As time goes on, this is going to change. That's why having a self-assessment and a self-evaluation works really well. So I want to talk about someone that I got a chance to meet through Genius Network named David Berg and how he's transforming the world of healthcare. And I got a chance to tour his facility about a week and a half ago at the time of our show here today. And I also got a chance to meet his wife. They co-founded Arrowhead Health Centers here in Arizona. And by the way, if you're looking for a different way to experience healthcare, I encourage you to go find out what Dave Berg is doing at the Arrowhead Health Centers, right? Maybe you've already got insurance. See what you can do to get linked in with the Arrowhead Health Center. If you don't have insurance or you're having to get it on your own, figure out how you can tap into what they're doing, because I can share with you my experience is they're transforming the way that it's done from top to bottom, right? Now, Dave actually gives out this, what I'll call an education awareness guide about why they created it, because they looked at a dysfunctional model, right? Because I don't know, have you ever been into a health facility where you felt supported, cared for truly? Or was it more about you being a number and getting shuffled through to get addressed? Well, at Dave's facility, it's different. You know what? They have over 95% of the people that walk through their doors end up from their appointment time to going and seeing the doctor within 3.5 minutes, right? However, they also have a certain number of people per month that don't get back there in 3.5 minutes, and they have a promise that if you're not seen in 14 minutes, they have a methodology and a strategy to turn you from just a client and a fan to now become a super fan. And they have a strategy for that. And you know what? They talk about that in their education awareness book here. They talk about the client experience, right? Anybody that works for him, them and their families get free health care. How many companies do you know doing that? I don't know any besides Dave's company. Them and their families. They've got a waiting list of people to work for them 100 deep at every position. So guess what? Do you think they attract world-class talent? I walked in that medical facility. You know what? I've walked into many facilities. How about you? And you walk in, there's certain color schemes, and you feel depressed. You know, it's low energy. You know, people aren't smiling. I walked in this place. You know what I found? I found a pep in the energy. It's not like a Starbucks per se, but for a medical facility, I would say it's closer to Starbucks than the typical gray walls that make you feel like you're sick and depressed. And I got greeted with something surprising, a smile, where it mattered. I wasn't there as a patient, but then I looked around at all the patients, and I saw that there was a different energy, right? And their staff had a different energy and a different attentiveness and a different level of care and compassion overall. And you know what I also found? That's part of their value statement, their entire book that you can get your hands on if you go visit Arrowhead Health Centers and learn more about what they're doing. You know, the number one value they have is to inspire people to tell the Arrowhead Health Center story. And you know what I'm doing right now? I was so moved by what they're doing. I'm sharing their story. You know why? Because I appreciate world-class experiences, and I know you do too. And you deserve a world-class experience, don't you? And you know what I also found? Not only was the energy something that I could relate to really well, and I want, and I imagine you want too, but I also found that every one of the patients that walked in was moved into to see their doctor within 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I got to watch this firsthand. Now, he also stated it doesn't happen every day. They have a certain percentage that don't, but they have a strategy for that. And you know what? When we come back after the break, I'm going to share more about David Berg's strategy at Arrowhead Health Centers and what it means for you, most importantly, of how you can take the idea of a problem in a system, call it the healthcare system, and how you can transform an industry. And I'm going to reveal some numbers about the profitability that David shared with me. But you know why? Because they're doing something different. And in order for things to be different, guess what? You got to be willing to do something different. In order for things to change, you got to be willing to change, don't you? Well, what is it that you want to disrupt today? Number one, it starts with you, but I want to challenge you to look, where are their problems? And rather than hiding from problems, I want you to embrace those problems, because you know what? Inside of you and me, we've got the answers to change and transforms the entire industry and or community and or the world. So when we come back, more about David Berg and also the prophet Joshua Shafran on growthtofreedom.com. Welcome back. Let's summarize the first three segments of the show. We've been talking about disrupting the status quo. We've been talking about upping your game, changing your game. We've been talking about where are you now, where are you going, how are you going to get there, why do you want to get there. We've been talking about David Berg and how he saw a problem in industry. I don't know, do you see a problem in healthcare? I do. He's fixing it. He's solving it, but not just solving it in incremental ways. He's doing it exponentially. And you know what? His company growth is exponential because he's doing it differently. He looks at it differently. You know what? I want to highlight on page 12. And by the way, you can get yourself a copy of this. Go look up Arrowhead Health Center. He's got multiple facilities. I got a chance to tour the Glendale location. David spends some time there as well. I don't know if you'll be able to see David, who's the CEO, but nonetheless, go check this out and ask for your copy of their storybook because it's impressive. Right? I'm going to go to page 12 here, the triple aim. You know what the number one thing that they focus on? Great client experience. You know the other two things they focus on? Lower costs and healthier people. And they do that through an integrated strategy that's just revolutionizing the way healthcare works. You know, I'll give you an example. I mean, by the way, do you ever find it frustrating to deal with your medical facility, your healthcare provider? Ever, get a situation where you get a bill because it's mixed up, some of it was insured, some of it wasn't, you had to go through the rigmarole of multiple phone calls? Well, guess what? David's company looks at it a whole different way to avoid that upfront, in advance, in full. Why? Because they're doing it different. Now, I don't have time to go through all of it, but part of it is the triple aim process. And again, you can literally get their entire blueprint of how they think about how they treat their clients and get their procedures of how they would be treating you. They make this available to anybody that walks in. Everybody's role, number one, inspire people and coworkers to tell their Arrowhead healthcare story at work and at home. Well, here I am. I'm talking about it on radio. Why? Because it's rare that you see the kind of wisdom that you see in this. And I love this about what they're doing. Another thing that was incredibly impressive is how they make the difference. Number one, they have what's called integrated care. This is on page 72 of their program. Personalized game plans. Now, I walked in. Have you ever walked into a clinic and you went into your room, right, and it's all sterilized and it has the same colors as being sterilized, and you walk in, you don't know what's going on, and there isn't a plan. Well, you know what? They have this down to a science. They have certain educational tools on the wall that not only you can look at and make sense of in layman's terms, but not the nurses use these tools, the doctors use these tools, and you know what that means? They're all speaking the same language. Have you ever had a nurse tell you one thing and the doctor told you something that seemed to contradict exactly what the nurse said up front in your medical care? I know I have, right? Or you had to repeat yourself time and time again. They avoid all that. So they have a personalized game plan and they have the blueprints to educate you. So you know exactly where you are in the process and what happens as you progress in the process. And also, guess what? Do you ever face stumbling blocks? I remember years ago, I had pins in my wrist after a serious baseball injury, right? And I had a few setbacks on my therapy plan. Well, guess what? They already anticipate what those setbacks are and they educate you on what those things might be. Again, they've thought of the details to help you be a more informed client, turning you from a client to a fan to what we call super fans, right? They have same day, next day appointments. Where else in medical care do you get something like that, right? And they have a promise to be able to do that. They have reserved parking spaces. You have 24/7 concierge visit by phone, 24/7. What medical facilities doing that besides emergency rooms? Which I don't know. I don't know. When's the last time you've been to an emergency? I don't want to go there. I'd rather have a concierge. How about you? Or how about care logistics, right? Which simply what that means, it makes the experience much easier, more effortless for you, allows you to save time, and also helps ease the stress. You ever been in a situation where you had a sick kid at home? I know my daughter today is sick. And you ever been in a situation where you'd like to get her in the clinic, but then you have to think about your work situation? You have to think about, how can I get it fit in? And many times they can't get you in for 4 or 5 days. Well, that's one of the reasons they have next day care, right? I talked about their 14-minute wait policy, their promise that if they don't meet your time back within 14 minutes, they have a way and a strategy to be able to handle that. They have a walk-in policy. They accept walk-ins. Isn't that amazing? Now, I don't want to overdo this because I have a tendency to get pretty excited about things that I really enjoy. And I can't promise you'll have the same experience that I will, but I can tell you there's a lot of wisdom in this. And, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, can you learn from something like this awareness educational tool to put in place to educate your potential clients? They use this tool as they have an entire education system to bring people in to make sure that they know this manual inside and out, frontwards and backwards. Why? They want people to be able to share the same story, right? And at the end of the day, in business and in life, what I've discovered about myself is I'm really great at telling people like David's story and edifying and promoting really well. And I haven't done such a good job promoting my story. And I'm going to be working on that. That's one of the things I've got to work on. And guess what? Maybe you need to work on that too for your business, for you personally. In fact, at the break, Matt, who's our video production executive, he asked, how can I promote myself better? Well, one way to do that is to create an educational tool. And Joe calls this a consumer awareness guide. That's his terminology. You can go look it up online. Joe Polish, consumer awareness guide. He did this for carpet cleaning. He's done it for pest control. He helped David with the insights for this consumer guide. And David is on version 5.2 right now. I had a chance. He was showing me his notes when I met with him last week in Chicago. And in fact, he's going to put a quote in there for me. So I guess maybe that's why I'm so excited to promote what he's doing. No, I mean, it's an incredible experience. But when you put the experience first and you look to think of how you can provide the best client experience, how they feel. Dean Graziosi talks about it's how they feel that matters. As you work with a client, it's how you make them feel. And if you can educate them in advance about what you do and how you do it and where they're at and anticipate some of the obstacles and objectives, there's no limit. So how can you put this in place? For me, I put together an education guide for my baseball career when I was 16 years. Now, was it this elaborate? No. Was it this powerful? No. But something is better than nothing, and this is a great blueprint for you to start to look at. In the book Think and Grow Rich, I think that's where I got the original idea to promote and sell myself. I had read Think and Grow Rich. Yes, it's 16 years old, and it talked about how do you sell yourself, and there was a formula in there to do it, and that's what I used for promoting myself to colleges, right? And then I come to find out a few years later, one of my first sales jobs was actually selling college recruiting services, because I didn't know this, but there were actually services that would actually help promote you, right? Someone saw a problem similar to mine, came up with a solution. And I had a fun time working with Roger George on that particular project. But here's a consumer education guide for business. But you could take this personally or professionally or for your business as an entrepreneur and come up with your version. What would that do for you? Would that give your potential clients, team members, vendors, suppliers, your stakeholders, would that give them more confidence, clarity, focus? Would it give them more direction on what you do and how you do it? I champion to say yes. And guess what? You deserve it. You deserve it. So I'd encourage you, number one, go visit David. Number two, get your copy of this. Number three, replicate a version for you personally and for your business if you have one. Those would be the best steps I could recommend for you right now, right? And with that, I want to talk about a good friend of mine that I've known for over a decade. His name's Joshua Shafran. He's the prophet, right? And I don't have a lot of time to be able to go in this, but Joshua just sent me a galley copy of his book that he's publishing. It's called The Profit, Out of 10 Times Your Life, Influence, and Business Success. And Joshua's been a good friend. He and I worked together for some time as partners in a couple projects, and we did some incredible things as I was building my companies. And then we went, in separate directions on a few projects. But I mean, he's put together a model here that essentially shows you how to be a better entrepreneur, guides you on the process of leadership, that ultimately helps you as far as crafting your vision, how to be able to build a business model that separates you uniquely from any others in your field, and what Jay Abraham calls be preeminent. So he talks about business model preeminence and how to be able to do it, not just what to do, but step by step of how to do it. I mean, this is like a college education, PhD, from one of the smartest entrepreneurs I know, right? And this book, I don't believe yet is available, but I just wanted to bring it up because I feel very touched, because in the book, in his acknowledgments, he surprised me. I was not aware of this. We had conversations about his book. He said, however, there are 3 people I need to acknowledge specifically, because without their help, this book would still be among my ever-growing of someday maybe I will. Do you have a someday I'll list? Someday I'll get to that. Someday I'll write the book. Someday I'll go out and do that karaoke. Someday I'll go out and create a CD. Someday. So for him, he said this book would still be among his ever-growing, long someday I'll projects list. Dan Kuschell. Thanks for being a beacon of simplicity, for reminding me of my value when I forget, and for your uncanny clarity about the shortest path to impactful solutions and profits. Wow. Gives me chills bringing that up. Because in a sense, that's what I do. That's what I do. And I'm really great at being able to do that for others, and I'm working to get better at doing it for me. And you know what? If you get a chance, check out Joshua. You can learn about him at The Profit. But see, he took his 20-year business career and he condensed that wisdom into this book, right? And this book overall is over 300 pages from someone I trust, someone I just endear as a friend, and of course I'm biased, he's a friend. And I got a chance to work with him. He's the real deal. He's a no BS kind of guy. In fact, we both had decided at certain points in time to walk away from certain types of partnerships and industries, that it would have been much easier to say yes than no. Have you ever been there? Again, back at that crossroad, right? You ever been in a situation where you had something that was going so, it was like a golden goose bringing you X, right? And that X could be, a lot of different things. Certainty, clarity, financial reward, growth, opportunity, all these things. But there was something missing out of it. And you know what? One of the things I respect about Joshua is he was true to himself. He realized, you know what? That isn't what I want to do. That's not what I stand for. And I think it's also one of the reasons that we have such a bond, not only then, but also today. Because it's not just about the money. It's about making a difference, about making an impact, about contribution, about value creation. Joe Polish talks about it frequently, that money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation. In fact, it's such a powerful statement, I'm going to repeat it. Money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation. What value are you going to go out and create today? Either on your own as an independent business owner, as an entrepreneur, changing the world, or even right at home. You know, my hardest job is, and the hardest focus I have is to be a great dad. Number 1. Number 2, it's to be a great husband. Number 3, it's focusing on my health. Number 4, it's everything else. And it's not the what I do that matters so much. It's not the what I accomplish, but it's the who I am that matters. Doing it with integrity. And this is someone doing it with integrity. One of the smartest business people you'll ever meet. At some point, I'm sure I'm going to have him on the show. But I was so proud to see this copy of his book. And then that shout out of his acknowledgement, which again, I had no idea about. And I can't help but not bring it up. So we've got someone who's got a 20-year career. We've got someone who's written a new book. We've been talking about Dan Sullivan. We've been talking about Joe Polish. And you know what? Time flies when we're having fun, doesn't it? So what are the action steps you can take today? Again, our theme has been disrupting the status quo. How are you going to go out and disrupt it? Are you going to go write your book? You're going to take something off your someday I'll list? I challenge you, do it. Go for it. You deserve it. You're the best. You're a champion. You just need to reach inside and, you know what, overcome that little monster called fear, right? Be more afraid of not doing it than doing it. Because I can share this with you. If you try and fail, you'll find a way to adapt and modify and come up with a better way. And that's what disrupting the status quo is all about, right? And if this show has resonated with you in some small way, I encourage you to repeat after me. I'm a champion. I'm a winner. But more importantly, I want you to take action with what you're learning. We've got a special resource package we put together for you. Includes our book, A Champion in the Making, Awaken the Champion within your life, business, relationship, Walking with the Wise with 30 of the top mentors in the world. We've got our audio program on influence, audio on and video on marketing, strategies for greater success, greater productivity, greater leads, sales, and profits, and a guide to hiring better, smarter people. And you can get that at growthtofreedom.com/mastery. That's growthtofreedom.com/mastery. Or pick up the phone right now and call 602-246-3389. That's 602-246-3389. I want to thank you for being with us today. Guess what? Time flies when we're having fun. Take action with what you've learned. Seize the day. Make it a great week, and we'll see you next time on growthtofreedom.com.
Gotta keep